Hi everyone, Alon Lits here, the CEO of October Health. Very excited to have Mmasechaba Matli with me. She's the head of L&D for Momentum Group International. And we're here to speak about a growth mindset for your employees and how you can really help them on their learning journey. So with that, welcome. Thanks for joining me.
Thank you so much, Alon. I'm excited to be here.
Awesome. So I always love to kick these off with a bit of context, a bit of background on your career. Obviously, you had Momentum today, but how did you find yourself at Momentum?
My career started many moons ago. I completed my undergrad with Wits University, and I then decided to go work. So I was accepted into a graduate program with a big retailer. It was a giant at the time, Adcon. And I enjoyed my time there. So after the graduate program, I then went to L&D and I got a specialist position. And there I was exposed to the whole entire value chain of L&D end to end. From there, I then left and joined MultiChoice. It was quite a short stint. And from MultiChoice, then I was headhunted by Nedbank to join them. Still in the L&D department, but more specialized, design and development, and spent quite a bit at Nedbank, great exposure. And from Nedbank, then I moved to Rand Mutual Assurance, which is a niche insurer, and they wanted me to come and help them establish an L&D department. We did that, we had fun, we did a lot of exciting stuff, and here I am with Momentum Group.
Awesome. So I think that's quite the career. Some of, I think, South Africans leading and most loved brands behind you. So really testament to, your ability and your ability to drive value. So maybe starting off just, before we speak about organizations, from your own perspective, what's probably important is to ensure that you have this growth mindset and you upskilling yourself to ensure you stay up to date with trends in the L&D space and the broader HR space and the people space. And how do you do that? How do you ensure that you create that growth mindset for yourself?
Okay, so firstly, it's by making sure that I attend conferences like the one we're attending today, just to get an outside view on what the other companies are doing, what my peers are doing in the various companies, in the various industries. And then secondly, also, I read. I'm a reader. I read a lot. I Google a lot as well. If I don't know anything or something that sparked my, interest and curiosity, I was watching TV, then I would go and read about it. And over and above that, I attend my training at work. So if there's any gaps that I need to address, I do training and I do a lot of self-study through our e-learning platform, and yeah.
So you take ownership, basically.
I do. My development is led by myself.
Yeah, and I think that's important because I think generally when you look at individuals, they're waiting for everything to happen for them. But if you're not going to take that ownership, you're just never going to learn, right? You're not going to grow career-wise. So I think that's the place to start.
Absolutely, I agree. I think particularly now for us, we've realized that for us to promote a great a culture of learning in the organization, a culture where it drives high performance and excellence, employees need to lead their own development. So development has to be employee-led, but most importantly, leader-led. Yeah.
Because people model behavior, right? Absolutely. So if they're not seeing their leaders walk the walk or talk the talk, they're not going to do it themselves.
Agreed.
But I think there's a lot to unpack there. But before we get there, I think, what's really interesting about your career, especially, Momentum today, some of your previous employers, is these are really large organizations, very diverse workforces, right? So the L&D needs across these organizations must differ depending on what role an individual's in, right? So how do you build an L&D program in an organization that is as diverse as, a retailer, just using that as an example, or a bank where you've got, entry-level junior employees to very senior employees. How do you build it, or where do you even start? It must be quite overwhelming.
So obviously it depends on what the program is about, but we need to understand what our employee needs are, but over and above our client needs. So some of the programs, the need would come directly from business and say, listen, Mmasechaba, we've identified a gap in this area and we need to address it. Or listen, the future of the industry is going this direction, and we know for a fact that our employees don't have the necessary skills. So let's work on that. And then there's also gaps that will come from employees where they themselves would have done an assessment of some sort, and they know that there's certain gaps that they need to address, maybe for their current role, for them to be performing, or for a future role, perhaps maybe they're trying to pivot their careers or get a more senior role. Okay, so we've got to do a program, and we've got to cater for various needs. Our programs are always aligned to our competencies that we've defined. So we've got core competencies, and then we've got leadership competencies, we've got technical competencies that are quite diverse. But each and every competency has various levels. So you've got from level 1, which would be the most foundational, and then to build on to basic and to the most advanced and expert thereafter, which would then be your level 5. So when developing a program, you need to then understand who is going to go on this program. Are you going to get people who are quite junior? And by junior, I mean that they're still learning this particular skill. Then we know that we need to then design this program and pitch it at this level, at a more basic or foundational. Or we're going to get more experienced employees coming onto this program, then that means that we need to maybe pitch it at advanced or at an expert level. And what that would mean is that we don't focus on theory at that level. It's more practical and more experiential.
Sure. So there's a lot there. I think just to summarize the really important points that you made, I think starting off with the assessments, right? So where are the gaps both at an organizational level and an individual level, really important. And it's amazing to see the amount of work around competencies, to see that these are things that we can objectively measure. Because how can you build on something without knowing what your KPI is for success, right? So I think, that leads to my next question around, how do you measure the impact of various programs that you're looking to implement at a high level? How do you, look back at a program and say, well, wow, that was successful?
There needs to have been a shift. The first shift that one would look at is a shift in behavior. Did I move from point A to B? Am I getting better at something? And for that behavioral shift to happen, I would have had to demonstrate the skill that I've learned. Over and above behavior, we then need to talk about performance. As an individual, I need to see my performance increasing and getting better and getting to the aspirational level of excellence. Then for an organization, we start talking about impact in terms of numbers, or us being able to provide our clients with a great experience, and therefore the business is performing better. And when we look at impact, we would look at individual as well as business a shift. Yeah.
That makes a ton of sense. And maybe then just to expand on some of the programs that you run, I think obviously you've got two ends of the spectrum, right? On one side, you can have, in-person trainings and sessions, and there are pros and cons to those. Cons maybe being the costs involved. And then you've got virtual intervention. So how do you think about, what is a right intervention for the skill that I'm looking to develop here for employees?
It starts by understanding your employees, your learners. Where I am at MMH International, we service various African countries as well as Asia. And in some of the African countries, we have employees who don't have like computers or a tablet for them to be able to learn. So that means that the learner management system that we have, they're unable to access because then they don't have, the technology to be able to access it. And most of these would be in a sales environment where they are always on foot, Then another challenge would be connectivity.
Yeah. A lot of things that we take for granted. Right?
Absolutely. Yeah. So you find that in some countries, good connectivity is a serious challenge. So if you were to develop a training or a learning solution for a learner in Ghana, I need to first start thinking about those things. What access do they have? And if I'm going to do self-study and I'm e-learning, are they going to be able to access it? And if the answer is no, then I need to look for other solutions. And then we start thinking, is face-to-face a solution? If it is, do we have the money to actually afford to have a face-to-face intervention? Or can we maybe do a blended learning experience where we get them to actually access the learning on their phones, because most people have smartphones. And maybe part of the journey is that instead of doing a 4-day training session, we do 1 day so that we're able to then cater for the budget that we have.
So there's a lot of, I guess, in some cases, conflicting priorities, and starting point being the context, right? Like, where are your employees operating? What is that environment like? I think another point which I want to really expand on is you touched on, people are busy, right? Like you got salespeople, time not selling, right, is time not being able to hit targets.
Yeah.
Right? So you're pulling them away from something. Obviously, there's a reason for that, but sometimes that's not always an easy thing to do. So how do you really convince and encourage individuals to, make the time to learn, right? How do you drive that adoption?
That's a good question, and a difficult one to answer. So, goes back to learning culture, really working on, the environment and the motivations of our learners. So we have defined a particular path and a plan for ourselves in terms of us being able to promote a great learning culture so that employees are motivated to learn at any time and anywhere when they want. And part of it is understanding where they are at. So what we did is then, as an organization, did an assessment to understand where we are in our learning culture. And once we got the data, then we then said, how do we go about promoting a culture of excellence where employees want to learn and improve themselves all the time. They want to be at their aim game. For us to be able to do that, we needed first to create an environment that's enabling. And part of creating an environment that's enabling is making sure that there are learning opportunities created for employees. So if they want to pull learning at any time, whether they're at home over the weekend, they've had a busy day at work, they didn't have time, they should be able to go into a particular platform and be able to learn. Or they're at work and they don't want to do any self-study, then there should be opportunities for them to attend a workshop or a conference. So as L&D, we needed to make sure that opportunities of learning are there all the time for them. Then over and above that is also part of creating an enabling environment is making sure that leaders drive development. We are not constantly with the employees. The leader is. And the leader is the one that actually also creates an environment that is enabling. Yeah. They must drive the culture. So what we then did is we focused on the leader. how do you actually drive development for employees? What kind of environment do you need to create? Starting with time, giving employees time to actually do their learning. Is it a full day? Is it 1 hour? And then going back to the question around salespeople, business will never give you a day for people to learn. So then it's about, okay, how do we still ensure that people are learning, but still delivering on what they need to do? Is 1 hour reasonable? Absolutely. Or do we need a no meeting Wednesday where people are able to focus, but while they're focusing, they're also doing their learning? So it's really just about the environment and making sure that we create learning opportunities, but also driving learning through our leaders.
I love everything about what you've said, but I think, at the same time, people also sometimes need motivation. And I think, gamification is a big topic, right? It's all the rage. And, you shared when we were chatting earlier some ways that you've implemented gamification to drive adoption and compliance in some cases from an L&D perspective with learning programs that you roll out. So do you mind sharing a bit more about that?
With my current employer, what we've done is that we realized that there was a low uptake of completing mandatory compliance training. We are in the financial services, and compliance is critical. So what we then did is we gamified that whole learning experience. We created a leaderboard, and we created levels in terms of those leaderboards, and we get everyone excited to complete. I mean, we started with a very low uptake, and as we stand at the moment, we're sitting at almost 80% completion, and for South Africa, it's actually 100% for the South African team that supports then, the entire segment, which would then be Africa and India. And in India, we have 100% completion, and then some of our African countries are still trailing behind. But I mean, to move from such a low uptake to 80% and above, I think it's a huge achievement, and we're hoping to make sure that everybody gets to 100%. So. Everybody was just excited.
People love a good competition.
They loved it. And what we did is that we had leaderboards sent via email, via our LMS as a leaderboard as well there. And then we had also leaderboards communicated via WhatsApp. And we had leaderboards at EXCO level. We had departments. We had national.
It wasn't just individuals competing. It was teams and managers.
Absolutely. Okay. Yeah. And you'd be surprised how people just love winning. Yeah.
Even if it's just to compliance train.
Absolutely. And there was no prize. The prize was just being on top.
Yeah. But I love
didn't
that.
Give them any award.
You don't actually need to reward individuals other than the recognition and that competition that, well, if we're not doing it, then we better get our act together, right? Because we're being judged. So shining a spotlight on the importance of learning is part of that process as well.
Yeah. And what we've since done is that we've actually applied the same principles on our performance excellence and to get everybody to complete their final year ratings, and it worked like a charm as well. So not only did we implement gamification for learning, we then said, since it worked, let's apply it to performance management, and we call it performance excellence. Yeah.
Awesome. I think that's a great framing, and that's what it's about. Maybe just to touch on, I think they often speak about learning, being, there's formalized learning opportunities and there's on-the-job learning, right? So how do you give people that opportunity to learn on the job, upskill, maybe get exposure to other roles or other responsibilities? Is that a formalized process or program that you have within the organization? Is it more informal? Do you look to, deploy mentorship across the organization? How do you think about learning in that more informal type environment?
So Momentum Group has a million opportunities that enable informal learning. So we've got a coaching and mentoring program at a group level, and as business units, we then have an opportunity to implement in our various business units. And for international, we've just also done that. And over and above that, there are job shadowing opportunities, job rotation, for you to be able to, yes, yeah. These opportunities made available for our top talent, but as well as people who've raised their hands and said, I want to learn a particular skill, or I want to become the next Ellen, and therefore then we'll put together then a plan for them.
Awesome. So it's really also about the individual taking ownership. And I
Absolutely.
think another important point that you touched on there is that, well, individuals have to be, top performers to have these opportunities. But if you do that, the benefit of being in an organization like Momentum is that there are these opportunities, and you can almost have different careers within the organization because it is so diverse.
Yeah, so we believe in growing our own talent and making sure that we give our people opportunities to grow internally, and works very well for retention as well. So yes, we give them opportunities. Yeah.
So, I think what's important in the context of L&D, in the context of learning, is looking at the macro environment. And from a macro perspective, a big trend in the workplace is artificial intelligence, right? And how the reality of day-to-day for a lot of people within your organization is going to change with artificial intelligence. And I think, the saying that's thrown around, which I think is true, is that it's not going to be artificial intelligence that takes your role. It's going to be someone who knows how to utilize artificial intelligence that's going to take your role if you're not prepared to go on that learning journey yourself. So how do you think about that in the context of Momentum, in the context of learning within the group or across the group?
So I think, Ellen, often people fear what they don't know, and they fear the unknown. So as Momentum, we first started by saying, let's start by upskilling our employees in terms of what is AI, what can it do, what platforms are available, AI platforms are available for you to use for free. What are the dangers of AI as well, if you're going to be using it for work, I think there was one of the presenters yesterday spoke about AI is great, but we don't know where the data is going. So if you're going to be taking company data and putting it in there, what are the risks? So we had sessions company-wide, upskilling people on AI, its power and how you can use it to actually make your job better. Over and above this, as an organization, we believe that AI is not there to completely, take away people's jobs. It's actually there to make it better. So we're working on solutions and partnering with service providers to make sure that we are able to integrate AI in what we do.
Awesome. So I think, so much there that's important, right? Firstly, the change management aspect, right? Just the education piece, because I think part of the problem or challenge is that there's so much jargon, there's so much unknown, so much misperception that just, setting the ground rules and explaining the benefits that the technology can bring is the right starting point. And then really showing people that this is a superpower and it's something that they can enhance what they're doing, right? And if it's utilized in the right way, is exceptionally powerful. But at the same time, I think your point around just ensuring that there's safeguards around the use of internal data, and just maybe also not just taking everything that AI says as the gospel, being really, really important. So I think, there's been so much that we've unpacked. I think if you think about the future of learning, and you had your crystal ball, how do you see this world of L&D evolving, whether it's, within your organization or more broadly from an L&D perspective?
So I would really love, to see learning integrated, with your day-to-day as an employee, and not learning being seen as a standalone. Oh, I need to do my job and I also still need to do training. No, that as you're doing your job, you're actually recognizing that you're learning at the same time, and we've integrated tools to be able to help you do your job better. At the same time, from a technology perspective, I would love to see learning and development professionals learning about the various tech that's out there and how we can enhance the employee experience, but also make sure that our learners are learning and performing like AI. How do we then integrate it into our learning space through the apps and the learner management systems that we have, or experience platforms that we have to make learning better?
Awesome. I love that. So thanks so much. Really appreciate everyone for joining us here today. I think if I summarize, and there was a lot, but just some key points, starting off with the growth mindset at an individual level, right? Especially for leaders within organization, whether you're formally in an L&D role or just a leader, you need to have that growth mindset, the ability to continuously learn, to push yourself and take ownership of your own career. I think when it comes to the organization, where do you start? You start with skills assessments, right? Both at an organizational level as well as an individual level. And from there, you can use that to identify gaps, but those gaps need to be measured against something objective, right? Like your competencies. So do you have your competencies in place? How do you use those competencies to identify gaps? Again, individual level, organizational level, and then develop your programs from there. I think we touched on the importance of gamification and the power that has to motivate individuals. Important for individuals to, take that on themselves, but at the same time, a bit of motivation is powerful. We've spoken about the future of learning. I think the way that learning will evolve to integrate into your day-to-day, like it shouldn't be a chore, right? It should be something that you're learning as you're growing, and as you're growing, you're able to do more. So hopefully you enjoyed that. I learned a ton, and hopefully you did too. So thanks so much for joining us.
It's a pleasure. Thanks for inviting me.